GIS people. Welcome to version release 0.1 of this talk. I talk about this stuff all the time. I have friends, family, clients who are interested in me finding other people to talk to about this subject. So that's what we're going to do. And I'm hoping that at the end of this and then after this, that y'all will be willing to help me, help all of us kind of improve not just this talk, but the idea or ideas that I think we're all interested in and are working toward having a nice elevator pitch articulation of. So, heard from a couple people. Is there anybody who has a kind of different reason for being here?
Well, I'm wanting to kind of integrate more people in the open source community, develop a non-geospatial software into the geospatial world a bit, so to kind of explain to them the benefits of being able to do so is I think. And it's kind of a less serious answer to also explain to my parents what I actually do on a daily basis.
Hey, that's great. I'm sorry, what's your name?
It's Clinton.
Clinton, and where are you?
I work at Esri.
At Esri? Okay, great. So what do the non-GIS people do right now? What's their thing that they're doing?
As far as
Yeah, I may have misunderstood a little bit of who you were talking about. Wanting
I'm
to.
just talking about the general community. I work with the Python team there quite a bit. So
Okay. So they're all the way into it. So a lot of the reasons why you're here are a lot of the overlapping reasons why I'm here, which is that I caught the bug and have become this guy who will talk to people about the stuff that I like to do, sometimes whether or not people want to hear about it, but hopefully only when they ask. Started in college. I didn't start off in geography, in GIS. I started off in a whole nother sphere of academic endeavors. Then took a little time off when I realized that that wasn't really where I wanted to be. And when I came back, I found myself fulfilling a bunch of requirements I didn't have to. A BS in physics at the university I went to, you don't have to worry about most of the core requirements, and I'd placed out of the ones you did. So I came back, and there were all these geography classes that were filling all of my requirements. Physical geography, geography of East Asia, one of the most awesome classes I took, and some GIS classes. So I did that, and then after college, ended up finding that more of the IT stuff was useful at the time, and so ended up doing that. Came back to geography, to GIS, got hired to do some stuff, and then fell away again. Was putting, for a while I was even renovating data centers and putting networks in hospitals and doing stuff like that, which is fun work, but got out of that again and was doing some other stuff and kept getting phone calls from people who would say stuff like, hey man, remember that geodatabase you built back when we worked together? Yeah, I remember that. Well, I have a client and it'd be great if you could do something for him. All right, so eventually it dawned on me that this is what I should be I should go ahead and admit that the thing that I like to do is something people wanted me to do. So before we go any further though, I got to ask, how do you say the first acronym? GIS, okay. How do y'all say the second acronym? I heard QGIS, I heard QGIS. I'm probably going to default to QGIS. My little boy, he'll be 8 later this week. He was very proud of himself when yesterday he wished me good luck going to the conference and have fun talking about quantum GIS, because I told him what the Q was for. It doesn't stand for that anymore. So I may say QGIS. I will try to adopt QGIS as fast as possible, but I'm somebody's dad now, so I'm a little slower on the uptake. All right. I got into this perspective, kind of came to the 0.1 version of this talk through consulting, through dealing with people every day who are smart, who are capable, who have advanced degrees in hard sciences, in PhDs in forestry, and all sorts of really cool stuff, Interesting people. You can talk to them about anything from soil chemistry to duck blinds and feed stands at their hunting lease. But their primary job function is not GIS, but they use it very regularly for collecting field data, for their deliverables, and then just from being involved kind of on a user end, the developer community, the people that I work with, people like y'all, people that I talk to and learn from, just an amazing group of people across the board. So the other place that I get a bunch of these kind of, where I come at this same thing we're all kind of interested in figuring out, is the toys that we get to play with on a daily, weekly basis, the new stuff that's coming out. I don't know if you haven't played the CCM game, but there's always a lot of fun stuff going on and a lot of fun puzzles to figure out. So, and then watching the tools that we use grow and develop. QGIS is one of the tools that I work with the most and that I spend the most time helping other people learn to use. And just, is there anyone who's not used that application? Okay. So we all know it's an amazing tool that you can give to anybody and get them up and running. And it's become this incredible framework for adding on more and more, using more and more databases, all the data sets, almost everything you could want except for Mr. SID files. Just a ton of fun every day. And so it's hard to call it work. The people that I do work with, as I mentioned, they are environmental engineers, the people who get dirt under their fingernails. They are people, when you talk county and municipal people, you get into more people who deal with GIS every day, but a lot of the people that I talk to, again, who work at the county level, at the state level, they may use the services, but they aren't making the services. So my role in helping them tends to be as that interface between the stuff we're interested in building and using and doing and the people who need to use it as not just as a consumer, but as a sort of as part of their professional life, but not at the level that a lot of GIS projects are, where you can say, oh, well, if you need a tool for that, you can write it, or you can search for something and just find one that works for you. So people who need a little bit more than that. It's hard to call that a problem, though, because there's a ton of opportunity and there are a ton of solutions to people's questions waiting for them. Finding those solutions can be a bit cumbersome, and it does create some friction in the uptake and adoption among the communities that I tend to work with. So that's really where the focus ends up, where my focus ends up being, and where I've come to identify the group of people who are kind of the next wave of that accelerating adoption of the open source GIS toolset, are really those prosumers. We need a better term than that, but I think that starts to get at the kind of people we're talking about, who are those smart people who do more than just go to a county website to find a parcel to get some information about it so they can go do some work on that site. They want to actually, and do actually, create data sets from field mapping that they do, mapping the soils, prepping timber stands for harvest, or all the work that people do in the field that then gets translated into deliverables, reports, and maps, or feature sets, data sets that they need to send on to the next group of people, engineers, whoever. One of the ways I think about it is the difference between the people who wrote the code for Microsoft Word and the people who write novels or wrote novels using Microsoft Word. I don't know if anybody still uses Microsoft Word, but Does anybody still use Microsoft Word? Okay, so half the room. Okay, which sounds about right. In the bio intro thing for the talk, I promised that I would focus on 4 things. And those 4 kind of areas that all relate to the GIS for the people who aren't GIS people. Talking about software deployments is a big issue. The types of UI and UX adaptations are just thinking that goes into thinking about software and prepping it to fit into people's existing workflows. The back-end stuff that makes the adoption and uptake easier, so database schemas, other kind of ancillary services, software that makes getting up and running a lot easier, and then the types of design that's already there to build on. Thing 1, not in a Dr. Seuss sense, but getting the software. The easiest way to get the open source tools that I teach people how to use or that I set up for people is the live.osgo.org, which if you go there now, you will see, if you haven't been there, you can download, if you have the time, or if you have a nice fat connection, you can download a live CD and be up and running in a matter of minutes. Virtual machine. You can basically give someone a new computer for the cost of the time it takes to download the file and set it up, which is fantastic. When people get a little more advanced, running the latest code, I've got, for example, Larry Schaefer set up for running QGIS on your Mac natively, and it's fantastic. But doing that work, getting that set up, again, is kind of 1 or 2 steps beyond where a lot of people are when they need a tool that they need to be able to install, open, and then get rolling. Another area where there's amazing stuff to build on is the plugins, QGIS plugins. I'm going to actually let us all take a quick peek right there. You can feel free to go to plugins.qgis.org if you want, or if you want to go to, if you have QGIS open, QGIS open. See, I told you it's going to take some work. Feel free to look at the plugins. You can search for something. A lot of people who I work with engineers and need to use AutoCAD functionality. I happen to know certain tools they can use depending on what they want to do, but if you're just getting started, you can type CAD in, and as you can see, you've got a few options. Picking which one of those you want to get started with and hunting around when you're trying to get a file out the door so that you can get the deliverable to the client's engineer so that you can go pick your kid up to take him to baseball. Real situation is having the time to do that is time that's just not worth it at present. And there are other tools that people became accustomed to using while they were in grad school, while they were at a bigger firm in the private sector, while they were with a state government who could afford big site licenses for more expensive software. For bigger shops, a lot of times that licensing makes more sense than a solution like this. But for a lot of the guys and gals that I work with, the open source tool set really is more the Swiss Army knife they need instead of the space shuttle that will get them where they need to go, but is a little bit of overkill. So, oops, let's go back to the right place. There we go. And I mentioned the live.osgo.org, which is a great site, but from the OSGO homepage, you can't get there. So you can get to all these different web projects, open source tools to their home pages to download their software, but getting to that fantastic place is something you either have to know exists or you have to find it from Googling, which I don't actually know how I knew how to go there because I've known how to get there for so long. I only figured this out a couple years ago when I tried to get there from the home page and realized I couldn't. So, all right, thing two, how are we doing? We got 15 more minutes, 20 more minutes? I want to wrap this up because I want to hear more ideas from y'all. Second thing, the user interface, user experience type of stuff for fitting stuff into their workflows. There's some work to do creating default databases. I know a few years ago, Esri had some sort of general default database schemas for wetlands, for forestry, for some other stuff. I don't know how much those have matured. A lot of my work has been customizing stuff for specific, like, environmental consultancies, soil scientists, land conservation people who are managing 10 or 20,000 acres of timber, but not doing much else. So, but having default databases that people could get up and running with, and then having default file formats. A lot of people run into issues, you probably dealt with this, where they end up, if you do any consulting, they end up with a whole lot of project files on their servers or on their laptops or in their Dropbox, and they've got shape files in a few hundred folders from all the different places they've been, and no way to really hoover those all up into one central place. By the time people get there and get a little frustrated with that, that's when they start making phone calls and saying, hey, got this issue, could really use some help. So, again, because people are doing a bunch of other stuff and using computers and using GIS and using GPS units as tools, fitting more seamlessly into their workflow becomes a big deal. And mobile, more and more, obviously, becomes an issue, not just because mobile's a big deal and responsive and yada yada, but because a lot of the people we work with have always been kind of mobile first, because that's where you're collecting the data, whether you're getting street center lines or mapping stormwater points for a local municipality or picking up auger borings on a site where you're trying to design a septic reuse system. That's where you are first, is mobile. People just think of it as a GPS unit, and they tend to be running Windows CE on a Trimble handheld, or especially foresters end up using a lot of Garmins. There may be other groups of professionals who go Garmin first, but I don't know, is that kind of your experience? So, yeah, it must be something in the blood. I'm not sure. But there are some tools. If you've used GIS Cloud's MDC app, Android, iPhone, you can, if you do some work and set it up, you can end up achieving some of the same stuff, except for accuracy, because obviously, if you're using it on a phone, you're not quite getting the commercial quality. You're getting recreational quality GPS. But I have, just because I'm a nerd and like to do that sort of thing, I have actually done site delineations where I don't have any paper maps. All I have is flagging and my phone. And I have my maps on there, and I sketch on them. I collect all the data points, put them into the forms. So by the time I leave the field, I'm ready to send a report and file a permit application for a client. And it took longer because the interface I had was a little small, but we're getting there. It's a very cool place to be. iPad mini, iPad, that's probably a better size, but and more legible for a lot of the people who are hitting that 40s, maybe moving into some high 40s. I'm not going to go any higher than that, where our eyes start to appreciate bigger letters. That's all I'm going to say. All right. Thinking about maps, thinking about GIS software as something that doesn't just do GIS, but produces map deliverables. Not just as the only way of thinking about the software that we use or the software that we're developing or the apps or scripting that we're doing, but in terms of beginning to understand that a larger and larger percentage of the user base will be people who are looking at maps a little bit differently and mapping a little bit differently. They're looking at it as a one deliverable in a suite of things. So there's obviously a lot of understanding that the GIS software is going to be a little more complicated than the word processing software people are writing the reports with. But again, that's where those default database schema may come in handy, where that when I search for CAD on that QGIS, the plugins, QGIS, I'll get there, on the plugins.qgis.org website, or in the plugin viewer, is there a way to get bundles of those put together for different professional groups as just pointers to say, hey, if you are a botanist, here's the 5 plugins you want to have. If you are a stream gal and a wetland guy, whoever, these are the tools you want to have. You want to make sure you have grass or heck grass or whatever tool you want to have, toolbox you want to have. Thinking about things like that. It's not stuff that can happen overnight, right? It would reduce the flow of my business a little bit, but it would make a lot of people a lot more happier. And honestly, anyone who's done tech support understands that taking care of those softball questions, the GIS equivalent of my internet is broken, is the kind of thing that actually long-term helps us all out. And then the last thing is that we really are already there in so many ways. The tools that are available, that have become available over the 20 years that I've been involved in this industry, it's phenomenal. I remember being upset. I mean, I was in college, so it was an angsty sort of upset at my medical geography professor whose class was right across the hall from the GIS lab, back when everything was on Sun, Spark stations, and you're using big digitizing tables and ArcInfo, and she wanted us to make maps, draw them by hand. And we had this whole lab right across the hall. And I said, why can't we do that? Well, we're to the point now where that's everyone's expectation. Making a map by hand almost seems crazy. We go online to use Google Maps just to figure out the best route to ride our bike. I mean, we use it all the time. Obviously, QGIS, QGIS, GRASS, Mapbox, these are tools that I use a lot, but there are a whole bunch of GIS apps, open source GIS apps that have amazing user interfaces, that are fast, that are fun to use, that the learning curve is really shallow. You can climb it really fast. And right now it's just a matter of building on that, and building on that is just a matter of thinking about that growing group of people who are using the software we all know and love and using it professionally, just not as their profession. So that's those 4 things, again, in a nutshell. I've talked a lot about what can be done. Put up or shut up. So the things I'm interested in doing, and please talk to me now, later, send me an email, whatever. I would actually like to go ahead and start a database schema project for at least 3 to 5 professions that I can think of. Anybody who's interested in that or knows people who's interested in that, if you want to introduce me, email, Twitter, whatever, I'll talk over text message, whatever works. Snapchat, I'd rather stay away from, just because, like I said, I'm in my 40s now. I'm a very young, very good-looking 40s, obviously, but okay. I can watch it, but I don't quite get it. So I would also like to take whatever feedback I get today and over the next few weeks and redo this presentation in a version 0.2 with a lot more examples from people of either successes or examples or things we can all look to as ways of serving that group of people, the not GIS people, and either do it web conference style with a lot of participants and people sharing the ideas, or just sharing the flat file, putting some on SlideShare, whatever works. So please, Twitter, email, me, I'll give you my phone number, don't be creepy, and that leaves the question of what we can all do, what you can do. So obviously we talked about including the perspective of non-GIS people in our GIS work and thinking about who we're creating the tools for. Some of that can come down to documentation, which is, I know, the last thing and not always something that we get done. But again, you can send any ideas you have to me. I have a growing group of people that I've been working with who are also interested in solving some of these problems, who are either building tools or doing other things. I'd be glad to introduce any of those groups of people. A guy in Colorado is, for example, trying to use Ruby to write a tool to lay out septic lines on contour within a bounded polygon, possibly even extrapolating the polygon from soil borings and then laying out the septic lines based on whatever criteria you put in, whatever the county offsets are. If I'm speaking a foreign language to some people, I'm sorry, but doing some cool things just because I had a client say, hey, here's something I'd really like, and I had a guy who was saying, hey, I'd really like a project. I had other stuff to do, so he's doing it. He may end up charging people for it, he may end up just putting it out there, but again, be glad to put people in touch with each other, keep things up to date, and please, snippets of thought, anything is welcome. And just to make sure you have no excuse if you do have an idea and want to forward it on, great ways to get in touch. And I hope we still have, okay, sweet. We still have 2 minutes. Or 7 minutes? Sweet. I plowed through that. Thank you for your patience. Who's got comments, criticisms, suggestions? Go ahead, please.
I'm just wondering, with wanting to use mobile devices more, and talking about industries like forestry where there's not cell coverage up there, do you have any solutions that you've seen used to address that, where you can still use those devices without having to bring additional GPS units or anything?
Oh, yeah, okay. So the question is about when you're doing field work, collecting data on mobile devices, what do you do when you're far away from a cell signal? And that's a legit question. One of the caveats was, do you have, or not caveats, but do you have to then bring additional GPS equipment with you anyways? Which begs the question then, at this point, what's the point? Well, that's entirely fair. I had a project recently where I think they ended up still being within cell coverage, but some people I was working with wanted to be able to give a guy running a hydroaxe a tablet that he could strap to his thigh or have up on the dash so he could see. They were cutting lot lines to do evaluations on a big piece of property, and he wanted the guy running the hydroaxe to know where he was without him having to be standing there with an auger hoping not to get mowed down. And it ended up working by downloading the map locally to, we ended up, in this case, using the MDC app. I want to say there was the cell coverage for the GPS, but I'm wondering, do you have to have cell coverage to get the GPS signal on the phone? Right.
It uses the cell network also to help location, but it's not necessary. You do get a rough GPS location without cell.
Yeah. So it's a lot less accurate because, like we said, it's recreational quality. But over time, that will hopefully or probably will become a moot issue. At present, it's a legitimate consideration because it makes a lot of sense if you need more than 30-foot accuracy, especially if you're down in a valley and you're probably getting 100-foot accuracy if you're lucky. It makes sense to have an antenna set up or hooked in, which with the right tablet you can do. Again, that's only an antenna. It's not a whole unit, but it does become more cumbersome, and obviously you then want to have that GPS unit with you. So, excellent question.